have access to the coast, and Peru is on one coast. But Colombia has the Caribbean and Pacific coast. So they have people look like us called costinos. You saw a black Colombian, 31% or 33% of Colombians in those days was black. So if you saw one, which I didn't see many in Bogota, if you saw one, they would be costinos from the coast. Okay, they didn't deal much in drugs, hardly at all. They were fishermen and stuff like that. Like black Caribbeans, that's what they were. Yeah. And then they had some islands, Providencia and what have you, that was the Caribbean coast. Right? That was the Caribbean coast. And so they wanted me to go to where this stuff was just getting started. And this was going to be the new shipping zones and everything. It turned out to be true. Well, it just so happens that I went there and got busy. That's why when we opened our masjid in East Oakland, with many of y'all's help, and they looked on the roof, they saw Iranians up there. When they asked me, who are those guys? I said, they're Iranians. I knew it. They thought I was still in the drug trade. Because remember, in those days, where did most of the drugs come from in the United States? Not Afghanistan. That was later, like now. Most of the drugs, where did the French Connection drugs came from? Turkey, right? And what's next door to Turkey? Iran. So that's where they focused on all their drugs from that part of the world. So the guy that we call the Shah of Iran that lived over across the bay was a big heroin dealer. So they thought, Big Hank is moving from cocaine to heroin, and those guys, talking about you guys, those Iranians on the roof, religious personality, everything, students, was my connections. That's what they thought. You could scrub their mind, you could shake them up, it would make no difference. They knew, I knew, talking about I quit, I got the Holy Ghost. They knew better. They knew you guys was, remember our masjid in Oakland. For years, it was a hub for ayah. Everybody came from Sacramento, they came from San Francisco, they came from down in San Jose, and they met at our masjid. Iranians meeting in the middle of the black neighborhood in East Oakland. So that was a big show. At the same time, I'm giving lectures all over the United States. To who? The Saudis then kicked me off of their program because they said, they gave a little talk that we want you to stay away from Iranians. Because remember the first trip I went up north, Vahid and Amir went right along with us. As we went to the so-called Sunnis and everything, Vahid and Amir would also visit the Iranians, right? And said, this is our brothers. It was a coordinated effort. We did good. And we raised a lot of money. We raised so much that we came across the United States, just my son and I, several trips, because after we bought the masjid, then we would do it raising funds for other people that had big cases and needed to go to court. Anyway, I'll get back to our point. Hopefully this will be a short lecture. today. As I said, this DVD I'm going to pass out in a few weeks in front of the Saba Center. I'm going to pass it out on Thursday night, Dua Komil night. And then I'm going to come back the next Thursday night with boxes to raise funds so that when you hear this, and I'm going to make another one this Thursday, when you hear this, this is a fundraiser from you, and I'm going to tell you why. And I'm going to bring you up on some of the things that you may have seen, but you didn't understand. So, just a little background. So you won't think that this is a new game. If you look at these pictures, I didn't show everybody this before. This is 1968. This is 1969. This is 100%. Is that a perfect Black Panther look? It's perfect. Stingy brim hat. But of course, I just have to. This is a 5-star beaver hat. It's not the Negro Panthers. This is a 5-star beaver. It's called a stingy brim. Stingy brim means the brim is small. See, this looks like 1 inch, not the big old flop down. No. It's called a stingy brim. So you may not know it, but this is kind of like high fashion. But you can see the Free Huey Newton buttons, right? Anybody that remember that time would know that's what they are. And a black leather jacket, even the dress, it looked the same as others, but it's a little bit more wealthier. Okay, that's 1968. That's at the beginning of East Oakland Enterprises. And those brothers here remember listening to, if you want to get a feeling of that period, listen to C.L. Franklin on the subject of black nationalism. Is that what it's called? The meaning of black power. Now, this right here is a year later. This is reality, and this is a disguise. This is a disguise. I was happy to disguise like that. And everybody thought it was, and it's publicity. You know, I bought people a lot of Cadillacs in those days. Everybody knows it. Okay. So every time they saw either my Cadillacs or somebody else driving a Cadillac, it was thousands of dollars of free advertisement. Why? Because in the black community in those days, you talked about what happened in the black community. Black people were not on the news where you could talk about so and so. And you talked to black people was a community at that time. So you didn't open up the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times and there's black people. Oh, no. Unless they had a couple of little programs on somebody. But the black community was a black community. So the famous people in the black community, if you saw the famous black man or part of the high echelon in our community driving down the street, they would say, yeah, man, I saw so-and-so. He was driving down the street. And these big cars are nothing nowadays, but in those days, 15 years before, we were barefooted, picking cotton in Arkansas, everybody, right? Barefooted. I'll put it like, at this time, 18 years before that, I was sitting on a mule while my father was plowing in the fields. And we got our water we'd pump the water and you'd go to our outhouse and it was country living, real country living. Okay. And 15 years later, we driving the biggest things that they make with mink on and da-da-da-da. There's an H right there, by the way. That was my nickname. And people talk about Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali, right here, he came to Oakland. He came to Oakland. This is when he was having a lot of trouble. I would say this is 70, or could have been, it was 1970. He was raising money. He had Wilma Rudolph and him, and they came and they gave a talk at the Oakland City College. Oakland City College was the same place where the Black Panther Party started, and it was right on Grove Street, right in the community. Now it's up in the hills, where you can't hardly get to it unless you take a bus up there. That's how white folks will do you. You got to organize right there in the community, right down the street. We're closing that down and sending it way up in the hills. Okay, anyway, that's Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali needed money in those days. That's me, of course, as part of my crew. If you could see homeboy here, I got a picture, but somebody stole it. I might be able to find it. If you saw his pocket, it was this big. Why? Because he was raising money. And we donated. We went there to help him. Okay. Of course, nobody would talk this stuff, but when Muhammad Ali died, they got crackpot Muslims from everywhere they didn't come from nobody that knew him. They didn't come to nobody that knew him. They come to people that didn't know him. And remember, all my friends are boxers too, not all of them, but many of them. So Muhammad Ali needed money. And one thing we had was big money. So we went to help him out. Here you go, champ, and that's it. We helped everybody else out. We bought people Cadillacs. Those Cadillacs were free publicity. Not free publicity, we paid for it. Why? Because every time somebody saw one of them go by, it ain't like now. Everybody got Cadillac. There's so many cars, but it wasn't like that at that time. And if we had cars, they were a little older. And a maximum of Chevy, and only preachers had new Cadillacs, and big preachers, not just a standard preacher. Yeah, there's nobody else had that in the black community. But we had them in our 20s, early 20s. We had all of that, and we believed in black power. That's what East Oakland Enterprises was. East Oakland Enterprises. Look, you got to understand the United States. Martin Luther King, I don't know how I got on this subject, but I might as well keep on. Martin Luther King moved to Chicago in 1968. Why? Because he wanted to start African American economic enterprise zones. And the first experiment would be Chicago, right? That means, he said, freedom, right? If you ain't got no money, you ain't gonna have no freedom, right? That made sense. In fact, that was a part of black nationalism that was called buy freedom. Get rich and you buy your freedom. You don't have to ask nobody for it. How much you want for it? If you got enough money, which makes a little sense, Because see, when you get big, you'll find that you on a big team. And in those days, most of the people on the big team up there were white. They were white, okay? Now, as you move up the ladder, things look different from up there looking down than they do from down there looking up. Okay. When we got into this, now you got to remember, I'm in the early 20s, still early 20s. I mean, it just coming in a hurry. So we're getting adjusted, but fundamentals we know. We want to push black pride, the benefits of black nationalism and black power. Okay. So maybe your friends are not deep enough to save enough money to buy new Cadillacs. So you buy them one. You buy another one and another. And pretty soon, what are people talking about in the black community? You can go to Oakland right now and they say, yeah, so-and-so bought so-and-so a Cadillac, da, 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 da. So say if you spent $50,000 on Cadillacs, yeah,